Hello, my name is Reverend Gregory Holston, and here is another episode of Just Nation, a program dedicated to dealing with the issues of faith, race, and justice here in the city of Philadelphia and beyond. And today we're dealing with, again, a very powerful issue that has great effect here in our city and many cities across the country. The power of gun violence prevention and the groups who are making real change in our city and across the nation about reducing gun violence that is happening in our neighborhoods. In 2021 in Philadelphia, we had 563 homicides here in the city of Philadelphia. That was the highest on record, and it was during this great pandemic that happened recently. But since that point in time, every year, because of the work of gun violence prevention organizations like some of the leaders we have here with you today, we've seen a steady decline as we opened up schools, as we opened up resources, as we poured a historic amount of resources into Philadelphia. And in all of that, the gun violence has gone down from the 563 till now in 2025, we have about 200 homicides. And by the time that you hear this, we'll have roughly about 220 homicides total for that year. That is a 60 to 70% decline. It is powerful, it's progressive, it is meaningful that it happened. And here, again, I'm glad to be here today with leaders who have been influential in making that happen. And so to my left here, I have Reuben Jones. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Reuben Jones. I'm the Executive Director of Frontline Dance, Inc. So we are a social justice advocacy organization. We do a lot of work around gun violence prevention. So we work with young people who are at risk to either commit an act of violence or be a victim of an act of violence. We work with men and women coming home from incarceration, and work with fathers who are typically non-custodial and are working their way back to rebuilding the family connection. But all these community members have the common thread of living in a city in which their needs are not being met. So we focus on helping reduce some of those barriers and helping them have their needs met so that we could then change the communal environment.
You've been doing this work for about 15 years now?
So we have been 501c3 for about 10, but I've been doing this work since 2002 in Philadelphia, basically as a volunteer, and then lending my talents and time and resources to different organizations that I believe in, like Mothers in Charge. Some of the work with Men United early on. I used to work in one of their programs in the schools. So yeah, it's been an extensive period of time of being on the ground in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your work. And Nicole?
Hi, Nicole Levy, so I'm a member of the 57 Blocks Coalition, and I am not somebody who would have thought I would be involved in gun violence prevention work, but I have to say, I'm really here and showing up because of the work that, organizations like Reuben's and other members of the 57 Coalition Blocks do. I've spent like 25 years working in fair lending, banking, government regulation, and just seeing a lot of waste and honestly wealth extraction from our communities that we know is a root cause of the violence that we see. And I feel like for me, I have 2 kids at home, and I just want to be a part of building beloved communities, showing up for kids, showing up for neighbors, being loving, being caring, and that's the work that's happening here with these organizations in Philadelphia. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And so I want to make the connection here. The 57 Block Coalition was named after the 57 blocks that in 2020 had 10 or more shootings on them from 2015 to 2021.
And those were also the blocks that had historically been redlined in Philadelphia, drawing the direct connection is, we know between historic redlining and investment and the high rates of gun violence that we see.
And we need to say that again, the connection between the highest blocks who had the most gun violence were the 53 out of the 57 were redlined for disinvestment over 100 or about 100 years ago.
For over 100 years ago, but The policies of the FHA, VA loans, private investments, all of the things we think about have shaped the city the way it looks today, and those investment patterns are still continuing. And I could talk dollars and cents, but really for me it shows up when we look at, like, I have a son, he plays baseball, we drive out in the beautiful baseball fields everywhere for kids to play on. We were talking about the YMCA earlier in Ardmore. When kids have things to do, when they see that the world around them, the grown-ups around them, are caring, investing in their schools, giving them safe places to play, that's the difference between violence and thriving in communities. So it was historic, and because of the patterns that set in motion, it persists today.
Yeah, and so Ruben, go further and make the connection between the disinvestment that Nicole was talking about, the redlining she was talking about, and what you see on the ground every day.
I mean, you could just look at one simple thing. Philadelphia closed, I think it was 26 schools, public schools. Half of them were in North Philadelphia, right? I grew up in North Philadelphia. When we look at gun violence in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia is a hot spot. When you look at addiction, the whole world has seen Kensington on the front pages of every news publication, right? So we did an overlay map of all those different intricate trauma-inducing environments, right? At the heart of it is this specific and intentional government disinvestment. We're not going to allow them to build homes here. We're not going to allow them to purchase homes here. We're not going to invest in schools here. We're not going to invest in playgrounds. I was just rewatching the movie Just Mercy. And then some of the opening scenes, it's funny what you just mentioned about the YMCA and the baseball field. They take you, he was in Alabama. You see kids playing in the front yard with the sprinklers.
Yeah.
You see the father cutting the grass. Everything looks so beautiful, right? And then when they got to the scene where the black community, it was rusty cars in the driveway. It was like a hand mower, push mower. The kids are playing in like a dollar store little kiddie pool. Like, these differences are very specific and very intentional. So when you spend 80, 90 years of not allowing a specific community for a specific reason, preventing them from thriving, then it's no wonder we see the end result. That we're seeing people traumatized at early ages. When you go up in the projects and it's violent, and everybody's poor, and you're confined to these tiny spaces, and they become death traps where people with negative intention can harm people, that's traumatizing. And you don't come out of that trauma, unscathed.
Yes.
And then you add addiction to it, you add the gun violence, you add incarceration. So these were very intentional, there were some very intentional predecessors to those behaviors, to those experiences that kind of create the outcome that we see. So until we really recognize that we owe our brothers and our sisters and our fellow citizens an investment to make sure that everyone's needs was met, then I think we'll continue to see the kind of this disparity that we see right now in terms of violence.
So the key to gun violence prevention organizations is getting resources to reinvest in communities, reinvest in young people, reinvest in schools, reinvest in communities in ways that will lift up that community. And when you invest more in the community, it has immediate results and then less gun violence.
The example you gave of 563 homicides just, less than 5 years ago. And now to be in the early 200, I think the last time I saw was around 206. To know that there was some intentional investment, right? Maybe it wasn't enough that we called for, but there was an investment of to the tune of $1 million between the city and the state that went directly to those community leaders who are already doing the work in these communities, who already have relationships and infrastructure. So you can see the outcome when there is an investment, right? And that wasn't like a wholesale investment like in education and infrastructure. This is in community leadership. That says, okay, we're doing these things. We believe it could help if we had a little bit more resources to reach a few more people and do a few more things. It worked. So I believe and we believe that if we invest in schools, we invest in housing, we invest in wellness, mental health included, then we'll see a much bigger and more positive outcome.
In 2021, we had the pandemic,
Right.
and that took investment out of the community.
Right.
I mean, schools were closed, businesses were closed, sometimes rec centers were closed. And so young people had little to do. And then once the pandemic started to lessen and investment, therefore the schools reopened, the rec centers reopened, the community centers opened, the business centers and corridors opened, and that investment was kicked off. And then you had the additional government investment into gun violence prevention organizations on top of that. That combination together, do you believe that is one of the reasons why we have lower gun violence today?
Absolutely. 100%.
I mean, if I can just kind of take
Sure.
that a little further, I mean, I think what Ruben highlighted is really important, that government funding to community leaders, already community-based organizations, people who are already working, connected in those communities. But you were also talking about the videos and the pictures of the lawns and and I think state funding stepped up a little bit over the year, and that's sort of part of why we're seeing the reduction. But I really want to focus on the need for private sector investment too. One of the things that I research a lot is bank loans, home loans in Philadelphia. And every year in Philadelphia, you can track the data, who receives loans, who does it by community, by race. And there's nearly $20 billion every year that goes to white households for home improvement loans, new kitchens, new windows, new roofs, home ownership. $20 billion more than goes to black households in Philadelphia. And we know the city it's almost 50-50 black. So that's a huge disparity. And I think this is like going on for 70 or 80 years. So I know sometimes it's hard to focus on the numbers, but just thinking for a minute about the scale of what that means for communities to have $20 billion less in home ownership year after year after year, and the kind of trauma that can induce.
Yeah, so with that, let's talk a little bit about the kinds of investment and what kinds of investments really make a difference. I remember a young person about 15 years old was at one of our sessions talking to young people about gun violence. And the young man said, I'm 15. I walk out of my house, there's garbage everywhere. I walk out of my house, there's needles on the ground. I walk out of my house, I go to my school, the paint is peeling. The school is falling down. They don't care about us. So why should I care for myself? When you hear stories like that, you see the direct connection of how young people are internalizing that this community doesn't care about them by the way the community is invested in, by the way the community is kept clean and strong and well lit. And you have dealt with some of these questions in North Philly just to make the neighborhood safer by just making it cleaner and by making it more well lit. Why don't you share a little bit about that?
I will. I'll give you a prime example. We were partnered with a block up around 29th and Clearfield. And it really started with a kid getting killed over there, right? But it evolved into other things. Where the block that we ended up adopting, it's a skinny block, it's a small block. But the neighbors complained about people would zip down the block because it was, so you had 29th Street, and then you got this small street. There was the Ferris Club at the corner that, people, whatever. So they were afraid for their children because the way people were speeding down the block, they didn't have any working street lights. And then the people who were visiting this bar or club were doing their business out on the street with, sex workers on people's front steps and in cars in front of where the children were. So they had all these complaints. So we donated some lights. So we installed some lights for them. We went to the city, and I'll be honest, nothing happened. We donated some lights. We donated some speed bumps for the street that they installed themselves. We also went and talked to the owner of the establishment, and hey, the neighbors don't like this. They're going to be complaining. A certain city council person did send his community liaison person, whatever the title would be, constituents. And the ownership didn't take that lightly. So they were able to make immediate changes on the block because of a small amount of investment. These people who live in these areas that feel neglected has every right, to say, I dissent. This country is built on dissent, right? I don't approve of what you're doing. You're taking my tax dollars. You come out kissing the babies and eating fried chicken for your vote. But then when I have a need, and we're not even talking about employment, housing, or school. We're talking about something very simple: lighting,
Yes.
trash, speed bump. And when you hear someone dance and the need doesn't get met, it perpetuates this feeling of they don't care about me.
Yes.
It perpetuates this feeling of disenfranchisement, right, and isolation. So we can't meet some of those most basic needs. Caring for our children is supposed to be one of the top priorities in this city, right? Any major city. But when we neglect the safety, the wellness, the education, the health of our children, then that shows what our priorities truly are.
Go ahead.
It's about meeting basic needs, right? Is what we're talking about: food, clothing, love, education, lights, and it just amazes me how we'll see politicians again and again talk about how, we need to bring in these experts, we need to study the data, we need to invest, we need to give all this money to these consultants outside the city. No, just give the money to people in the neighborhoods who are loving and caring for their community. It's simple. We're doing the work, and it's great to be here with people doing that work, because that's what matters.
Yeah, we many of us have been involved in this issue, obviously. In 2018, the city gave less than $1 million to gun violence prevention organizations. I remember those discussions. Actually, the figure was $775,000. Was all they gave to gun violence prevention organizations. At that time, the homicides were around 360 homicides. And we said, why you give so little? If you would give $100 million, everybody looked at us like we were crazy. If you give $100 million, we believe we could reduce gun violence in this city by a great deal of amounts. They laughed. They pretty much laughed at us. But it is about the investment in young people, investment in lives. How about making sure people have enough to eat, a roof over their head, clothes on their back? If we just do the basic investments. Well, in gun violence, as I said, went up to 563 in 2021, and now they were talking about, okay, we'll put $20 million in. After fussing and yelling and screaming, they said, well, we'll put $20 million in, and then we got another $20 million from the state. And therefore, we had more money than we had ever had, and guess what happened? Gun violence went down.
I just about the $100 million figure you mentioned and how people laugh at that. From the perspective of someone who sits in banks and private companies and see all the giving that's happening, $100 million is nothing.
Nothing. Because it's not a priority. I just want to be clear. If you go grocery shopping, all you got is $50, and you got 4 kids, you're going to make some choices about what to buy. You know we need some protein. You know we need some cleaning supplies. We might not need Kool-Aid. We might not need donuts, right? You're going to prioritize to feed your family. And the clear decision that leadership makes is their priority is demonstrating how they spend their money, right? So if we don't allocate enough money for education, that's saying that we don't prioritize. I remember the same year we closed those schools, we were talking about building a new jail. So,
This is,
you know
and,
what I mean?
and we're
Absolutely,
out
absolutely.
teaching. I spent a lot of time out teaching in community people about budgeting. Those people know, but we need to be sitting down with our policymakers and talking to them about budgeting for priorities that matter.
And they prioritize other communities.
Yeah.
Right.
They somehow have schools in other communities that look like the Taj Mahal. I shared over and over the walk that myself and Senator Hughes did many years ago, going from Overbrook High School in West Philly, one of the most violent areas in our city, and that 4.5 mile walk to Lower Marion. And to see the changes in the neighborhood when you walk there. But when you get there, you just visit a high school that was built around the turn of a century, not the last century, the century before, who had non-functioning science labs. You get to Lower Marion, and you see new buildings just built there, 2 swimming pools, 2 theaters, as well as all of the football fields and athletic events. And only 4.5 miles away, you see such a stark difference. And you clearly know that Lower Marion has a majority white people in that high school, and Overbrook has majority black in the city. That kind of disinvestment in West Philadelphia, not upset about Lower Marion having its investment, just it should be on par with Lower Marion. And if it is, we would be talking about less gun violence.
So let's say it. What if all the schools were on equal par? There shouldn't be a difference between Lower Marion and Overbrook, right? Or Gratz, or Dobbins, right? Or Vaughs, or South Philly High, or Arden Reed, right?
Yes.
But we know that there is, right? And for me, when I see that, it tells me there's a lack of political will to change it. You can't make the argument to me that you care when by the stroke of a pen you can change it, and you don't use that stroke of a pen. I mean, let's be fair. The city has a $6 billion budget, right? Would it be?
$7
billion budget? Ask any educational expert what it would take to create an adequate education system in Pennsylvania. In Philadelphia, what that number will look like. I guarantee you the money will be there to do what we need to do. Housing, I know that the city's administration just introduced a new housing bill. We applaud that. Is it enough? No. What would it take to create the kind of city that there were no homeless people, that everybody was housed, all the children had adequate educational needs met, right? This is what we're talking about, transformational. So when we say prioritizing, if those things aren't priorities, then tell me what is. World Cup is beautiful. It's going to bring a lot of revenue to the cities. A lot of people are going to gain a lot of, popularity and whatever. All those things are great. We're not knocking that. But when we talk about prioritizing the resources, if we got $7 billion, how do we make sure that our children don't grow up to repeat this cycle that we've seen over and over? Yeah, because there's an ebb and flow. In 2013, they had 247 homicides, and we were lauding that as the greatest drop in 50 years. Now here we are in 25, and we're at a little bit more than 2. Again, probably going to break the 247 record. So there's an ebb and flow between the 500 and the 200. But guess what? If you're one of the families that lost one of those 200 people, you don't give a what
That's
about
right.
reduction. You lost a loved one. So until we can talk about 0 homicides in this city, we got a 50% dropout rate in the education system. So we can talk about 100% high school complete. Like, these are aspirational goals that we should be prioritizing, not accepting. And I'm sorry for getting hyped about positive.
No, you
not
good,
accepting.
you good. This is something to get hyped about.
When we have some gain or we move the needle a little bit. And don't get me wrong, 200 homicides versus 500 is nothing to sneeze at. So I'm not saying I applaud the efforts of all those community leaders who contributed to that reduction. But it's not enough for me, right? It's not enough for me when you see those mothers crying.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you ever been to Mothers in Charge and you hear any of those stories, it's heart-wrenching.
Yes, it is.
And we don't need to hear another mother tell a story about her son getting murdered, or, and I don't want to like sensationalize the recent murder that everyone's, grieving about in this city, but that was senseless. Could have been prevented. Could we put more resources into,
Yes.
This young lady's life not being taken? Of course. And if we're not going to prioritize that, then, I'm going to have to call that out every chance I get.
Yeah. It is difficult to see the grieving and not see the policy to transform that grieving.
Yes.
We know what works. You both have listed that banks who actually invest in communities, banks who actually would talk about that $20 billion difference in investment. Is that yearly?
Annual, yeah.
Annually, $20 billion annually difference between white homeowners and black homeowners. That $20 billion by itself, if that gap was closed, you would see no homicides. I think you would see
Absolutely.
You would see zero homicides if that gap was disappeared.
And the other thing I like to remind us is we have money in Philadelphia. Like we spend a lot of time lobbying Congress, City Council, saying they need to do more. But I also think about, and I did this lesson with second graders, if I can,
Sure,
where
please.
I was talking with second graders in South Philly, Francis Scott Key's school. They were really concerned about the stadium and what was going on with that, and they were very activated about that. So I went in and talked to them about, what's important to them in their neighborhood. They're talking about all the stores they have where they buy clothes, the restaurants, the homes, the library, the school, all of that. And we're playing a game and they're earning money throughout, because I'm teaching them about banking, what it means to bank. So at the end, they're counting up all their money. They're excited. They have like $500 in Monopoly money. They come and deposit. I'm the banker. I'm the big banker. So they all deposit their money with me. And I'm counting it up. I give them their deposit slips and their lollipops. I'm counting it up. And I'm like, wow, I have a lot of money here that I get to now go and reinvest and give a loan to somebody. I'm like, I have enough money. I could give like 10 people in this class a loan to buy a home. Who wants to buy a home in your community and own a home? Everyone's raising their hand. They all want to own homes. And then one of the other teachers comes over from the side, and this was like an exciting moment. She unzips her jacket and she has a big Sixers logo there. And she's like, no, don't give any of them loans to buy a home. Give me a loan. I want to knock down these homes and build a stadium. And these kids, and this was the cool part, these second graders were literally standing up out of their seats and saying, that's my money. You can't do that. But we, as grown-ups, we're not doing that. We're not standing up and saying, and so much of our money is in large banks like TD, Bank of America, who are not, their executives are not here in Philadelphia. Their profits are not flowing back here into Philadelphia, and the vast majority of their loans are not flowing back here into Philadelphia. So if we all collectively moved more of our money to local banks who are giving small business loans, home ownership loans here in our neighborhood, we could be doing a lot more to drive investments into our communities.
Can I just add one thing
sure.
to that real quick?
Yeah.
The point that you're making, it's going to make me sound like a hypocrite, but I'm going to say it. So we talk about Philadelphia being the largest, poorest big city, the poorest big city, right? But the reality is, we're not poor. A lot of people living in poverty. The city has a lot of wealth. It's just not evenly distributed. So if we look at where the money is, we do have enough to meet everyone's needs. The point being, the people who need it most don't have access to those resources. So I think we got to kind of reframe that whole thing about the poorest big city. The city is not that poor. $7 billion is not poor.
No, in fact, I would go further, because both these things are true.
Right.
One, it's the second poorest big city in the country, and at the same time, it's the 9th wealthiest city in the country.
You know what I mean?
How can both of these things be true
Right.
at the same time? because we got a lot of money.
We're messed up on our values.
It's just concentrated in few hands,
Right.
and a lot of people have very little.
Exactly.
You know, and so we are the wealthiest and the poorest at the same time.
We just got to get better at budgeting.
And priorities.
Priorities,
but
yeah.
the reality of what evens the playing field is something called taxes.
Right.
You know, and nobody wants to pay taxes. Not even people, poor people particularly don't want to pay taxes.
That's true.
But the reality is that poor people in Philadelphia pay a greater percentage of their income to taxes than the rich people do.
Right.
And if the rich people paid the tax level that they paid in the 1950s, which was 70% of their income, not in the 1950s, went to taxes. That's how you could build the suburbs. That's how you could build the highway system. That's how you did all those great projects, because they paid more of their money to pay and make sure that everybody prospered.
And that's not to mention large, I'm going to call them for-profit educational entities in our city who aren't paying their taxes.
Well, that's even another thing. But today, the rich pay about 18% of their money in taxes. So all of these issues around gun violence that we've been talking about can all be solved with community investment, whether it's homes and schools, rec centers, lighting, streets, all of cleanliness. All those things are services that government is supposed to provide that that we could provide greater community investment in, both private and public, and it would solve the gun violence problem.
Keep our kids safe.
Yeah.
But we really don't have an interest in doing that. Excuse me.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
And so as we talk about this, and I want the people in the community who's listening to really key into this. It's not the police.
Yeah.
It's not the police. The police will actually even tell you their job is not to prevent. Their job is to enforce the law. You know, and so gun violence prevention is not the work of the police. And over the last 4 years, we've had the same level of number of police in our police department here in Philadelphia. Relative same number. When it was 563, it was the same number as it is 200 today. That tells you it's not the number of police that make the difference. It's not the level of policing that make the difference. And I'm not disparaging any of the police and the work that they do. I'm just saying that's not their function. We want to prevent gun violence. It starts by investing in our communities.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think there's this false narrative about if you aren't espousing certain thoughts and feelings, then you're anti-whatever, right?
Nobody's anti here.
Nobody's anti. I think that the one thing that we all are, we're pro-life in the context of community survival. And, you know, when I look, you know, we talked about North Philly earlier. When I look around North Philadelphia and I see so much despair. North Philadelphia used to be a thriving part of the city. Like the Uptown Theater was our version of the Apollo. North Philly was alive and lit. Now, people who have been here for a couple generations, grandmother, living in a grandmother's house or whatever, they can't really afford to live in these spaces no more. So the developers are buying them out, really stealing the houses from them, you know, if you ask me. Some of the educational facilities you just mentioned, there seems to be a competition between Penn and Temple to own more land. I don't know, like the people who made Philadelphia home, like when I was a kid, are gone. It's a new Philadelphia. It's a different Philadelphia. And I think that to try to, you know, kind of pull back on some of that, we need people to own homes. Home ownership brings community stability, right? So we talked earlier about gun violence. So when you're working in gun violence prevention, it's not just about the guns, not just about the bullets, not just about people dying. It's about rebuilding communities. It's about reconnecting families.
Say that again, because I want the audience to hear that and feel that. Gun violence prevention work is what?
It's about rebuilding communities and reconnecting families. The more people feel connected, the more they feel a sense of ownership and pride in their communities, then the less vehemence and animosity and anger and hatred they're gonna feel towards their neighbor, because you know each other. You've built it, you have a level of self-esteem, you have a level of self-love and communal love. It's different when you see people out sweeping the front of their homes or their pavement or cleaning the steps or making sure that the recycle bins are, there's a difference. And then when you have people who are kind of transient in that community and don't care as much, and then the message from the city is they don't care as much, then it leaves a lot of despair when my calls aren't getting answered, when my needs aren't being met. You know, you start to feel like maybe this is not the place for me. And then we see people disconnected from each other. I don't want to be bothered with my neighbor. I put my trash can out there to save that spot, and he moved it. So I'm going to shoot him. You get what I'm saying? Like, this is where we end up at when we don't invest in communities. All those schools that we closed, most of them are sitting there vacant. The ones that the developers didn't pick up. Gun violence prevention means we can invest in those and create community hubs to provide resources to families, to children, to communities, to stay in the community, to look out for each other, to build in that community. And that's what we're talking about. Children should be able to go to the YMCA or the rec center and feel like they're in suburbia because they got state-of-the-art rec centers, not something we threw some paint up on and, you know what I mean?
And it's, I mean, I think, because I always focus on the investment. I think when you invest, things are easier.
Right.
But it's investment for exactly what you're talking about. That ability to build a beloved community is really like strengthening those connections between, and I mean, that's the work that your organization does. It's people out there connecting with neighbors, coming together. Hey, we need lights here. Let's put up lights. Let's clean this up. Let's get jobs for the kids. Let's mentor them. Like, that's what the investment is about, being able to do that kind of work.
And the disinvestment of the 23 schools you mentioned, most of those areas had upticks in violence when those schools were closed. And I'm still mindful of the story that a barber in Germantown told me about how he was engaged in the athletic activities of young people in his community, helped lead and teach a football team and a basketball team. And then when Germantown High School was closed, those kids who normally went to Germantown to play football, to play basketball, and part of their community, really didn't go to high school at all. They weren't going to go all the way over to Martin Luther King High School. So they languaged into the community, coming out at night. And the same athletic energy they put into football, they began to put into shooting each other, to the point where they literally kept score. For the number of shootings. I got 5 of yours, you got 4 of mine, kind of stuff back and forth on social media. And the pain that barber told me of that story, how kids he invested so much time to, he lost because we decided to disinvest in that community. We decided to disinvest in Germantown High School. We decided to disinvest in those kids. And we somehow believe that they weren't worth the investment. So we have all these paradoxes going on around disinvestment happening, but every time when we do invest, then the numbers go on down, but we still disinvesting from the community as we put more money in the community at the same time. We're still letting developers come in and dictate in communities and dictate in schools and dictate in pushing people out of those neighborhoods and communities to really build real community. So let's talk about that a little bit more. We know the issue now is community investment in public safety. We know now that it works, that it reduces gun violence. We know that more lighting, more street cleanings, more trauma services, more workforce development, more jobs and opportunities and better schools all create the neighborhoods that are safer and reduce gun violence. We know that's what happens. So since we know that, what is the vision for the next 10 years forward? How do we get this number that is around 200 homicides, and how do we move forward to reduce it even further, so maybe it's double digits or even single digits going on in the future?
The first step, if you don't mind, Nicole, I just want to respond
And
to
I want to hear from the banking position too, as well.
The first step is understanding that getting to 200 homicides in a year, 200 and some change, is the step towards getting to 100 and 50 and 25 and 10 and 0. We can't afford to take our foot off the pedal and rest on our laurels saying, hey, we got to 200. That's not a victory lap, right? And I want to be clear in saying that the investment that has worked, that investment has to continue, right? If we took our foot off the pedal, we're going to see it in escalation of those numbers again. So the first step is understanding this is a process. Our goal is to get to 0, and I hope that everybody agrees with that. This engage, whether it's city officials or the police or whoever, because the second part of it, if you don't think that there's something wrong with this picture, then that means you think that somehow black people are inherently violent and criminal. So if you want to take the Moynihan approach, then say that, and then we're going to hold your feet to the fire. But if you think that there's something wrong with the picture, then let's fix that. And again, let's continue the investment in community and community leadership. All the things that we just named: home ownership, education, recreation, lighting, green facilities, and I'm not just talking about like recycling. I'm talking about, I remember when Mayor Nutter wanted to invest in the Philadelphia canopy. Do you remember that conversation? Like create more, plant more trees and having more oxygen to the brain is one of the best things that when we talk about suburbia, think about what they got. They got space, right?
Trees.
Kids can run and play. They got trees and green spaces. Oxygenate the brain, help people have clear thinking, have a moment to take a breath and not be surrounded by concrete, steel, heat, violence, anger, hatred, all these things. I appreciate nature. I can eat. I have a job to go to. I have somewhere I can sleep tonight. I have a good quality school for my children to go to. That's the building blocks towards a successful, transformative city.
I'm going to let Nicole get in there, but I want to come back to that in just a moment.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about how do we get to 0, and we've already established how important funding is for community-based organizations like this. And then I start getting worried about the pendulum swing in funding that we're going to see that's going to hit Philadelphia over the next couple years in the loss of funding and what that's going to mean. And I know 57 Blocks Coalition and other organizations are starting to talk about things like owning our community, right? And now that community-based organizations have a little bit of funding, how can we use that, leverage more capital funding from private investors to start talking about like owning spaces, owning community hubs, creating social ventures where we're able to use businesses, small business enterprises to help fund and continue the work we do. I don't think that's alone enough, but I think those kinds of strategies, like just collectively, how can the community regain ownership of what our neighborhoods look like, how we work together, and finding strategies for that. And I do think a big piece of it is, as we know that the federal funding is certainly going to wane, I think it's ever more important to begin looking to private partners in Philadelphia, big companies, anchor organizations, banks, to say, hey, what is our strategy for the city? Here's money that we're already giving out the door. Let's be thoughtful, let's set priorities and make sure it's going to these communities that need it the most, who aren't already benefiting from these other subsidies, right? In terms of,
Let me ask that question. First of all, how much money are they giving to community organizations, particularly gun violence?
We need a champion to ask them. Let's have everyone open up their pocketbooks.
And how much can they give?
How much?
I want you to answer.
I mean, here's what I'll say. So I work in the banking space, and banks have obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act, where you can go out there and look at, a lot of these banks make community-based agreements in terms of we commit X number of dollars for first-time home buyers in majority minority communities over the next year. We commit this amount to small business. We commit this amount of grants and funding. These numbers are known, they're knowable. Banks know what their budget is, and I think it would be a really easy first step to get bankers around the table, and somebody like the mayor could do that, to say, okay, you're already giving this. How much more could you give? And how do we want to work together to make sure we're giving it to the right places? I think that's one step. But then we have to remember there are all of these other non-banks. We have Vanguard is right here in our neighborhood.
What's a non-bank?
Sorry, how amazing.
It's a bank that's not a bank?
I'm thinking about private lenders who aren't
Okay.
necessarily a bank. They're not FDIC insured, credit unions, but again, coming back to, we have a lot of investment companies, pharmaceuticals, large universities, coming back to us being one of the wealthiest cities, and we have we have the main line. Wealthy individuals have deep, deep pockets, and they want to give, and people care, and I think so many of us are just moved by whatever comes across our, I don't know how I met up with you, and I got engaged in gun violence. You know what I mean? It's accidental, but if we had a champion in the city really saying this is important, how do we pull people together to work? I think, and that's when we start to approach the level of public-private investment that created wealth, that created the middle class, like middle class, my Italian ancestors wouldn't, like my family would not be middle class if whiteness and investment hadn't been created by massive amounts of, so that's what it's going to take to cure the poverty. And so it's like, how are we talking about getting to that level of public-private investment?
So the bank that you're with, WISFIS, is promoting the idea of helping gun violence prevention organizations own their own spaces. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the program that has already happened?
Yes, so we did a great program called Owning Our Own Spaces, really, and I think there's so many barriers to entry. Well, let me back up. There's so many great programs. There's grants. There's, we have a land bank here in Philadelphia. We have community development financial institutions who are trying to get money out into the community, but there's paperwork, there's knowledge, there's information, there's just all of these barriers to entry. So what we decided to do at WISFIS and in partnership with the 57 Block Coalition was just host a seminar. Let's bring the experts together. Let's talk about what the steps are for a community organization to own a mixed-use commercial real estate property, for example. And it's simple education, but also networking and connecting who you know, and when you know a lender, when you know somebody at this community development financial institution, that opens doors, it opens possibilities. And I think that's what we're really about, is trying to connect all of our communities to these opportunities that do exist.
Tell us about the power of gun violence prevention organizations owning their own space.
Yeah, so let's look at it like this. Most of the orgs that I know that's doing this work, people are either doing it out of their homes, their kitchens, the backyard, whatever, the basement, or they rent a space from somebody. Sometimes there's partnership agreements. But I don't know a lot who physically owns outright their space. And ownership does a couple of things. Number one, it gives you more leeway and leverage to kind of make different decisions. But also gives you the opportunity to generate income. So if we're always dependent on grants and philanthropy, I don't think that's a successful model. I think that if you're we're a nonprofit, Frontline Dads, and we don't own a doggone thing, right? So we have to pay money to be in the building, to be in the space, to do the work that we do, right? But what if and I'm just using us because I'm here, I don't want to make it about. But what if we own the building? The new model in Philadelphia is mixed use, right? You have retail on the bottom, you have condos on the top, or whatever business offices. So why can't we do that in the social justice field. As we working with gun violence, what if you had 10 organizations that came together, purchased a building, put some very popular retail on the bottom that's going to turn a profit, space that you could rent out, and then we all had our individual space in that same building, as well as some communal space. You could even create it as a co-work space as well, so folks who are a little bit smaller starting out to come in and have some programming office space. And now we're changing the tide, we're stemming the tide, because we're talking about ownership of homes, right, through bank loans and all that. So we got to take the same approach and have ownership of our own lives and our own vision for transformation in our community. So that's one thing I think that would do, and it'll bring a big difference, because now you're less reliant on outside money. You can generate your own money to stay afloat.
Absolutely. So a gun violence prevention organization becomes not just a nonprofit, but also has a profit side that feeds income to the work of gun violence prevention.
Absolutely. Now you can employ people in the community. You can reinvest some of that money through re-grants or whatever you want to do. That's going to impact that community. You become more of a, hate to use the phrase, a boss than a worker, right? You're not working for somebody that's saying, do this with my money. You're saying, no, this is our money. Here's what we're going to do. So you can dictate that investment directly.
And it diversifies your income stream.
It does. It does.
So that if the grant leaves, so the grant is gone,
right,
for whatever reason, maybe because you said something that you shouldn't have said, but that you still can be able to sustain your organization.
Absolutely. And that's what we're talking about, long-term sustainability. So going back to something you said earlier, that 10-year plan that we always talk about building, it can't be that thing where it's every year the funding priorities change and you're, subject to having the rug pulled from underneath you. If we have a 10-year, if you have your own building, if you have ownership, then you can dictate the 10-year plan, at least from the communal perspective. We still want government investment, but from the communal perspective, you can dictate the direction because you're not being subjected to the whims of philanthropy.
Could banks come in and support gun violence prevention organizations by giving some, incentives around rates for mortgages or investment or even capital to be able to do this? Can banks play that kind of role?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talk about in the program is running capital campaigns to make sure that we're actively going out to solicit the kind of money to support ownership. I think when it comes to funding for nonprofits, I really cannot promote. We have some amazing community development financial institutions here, and they're able to offer sort of subsidized lower rates often, sort of expand the credit box, as we say, a little bit. Like typically, if you're going to buy a commercial real estate property, you need to have 30% down, but at a CDFI, maybe you only need 5% down or something. So these sort of programs that help put it more in reach.
Yeah. And can they package the programs they already have, create new incentives to attract directly gun violence prevention organizations as part of their mission of making sure that they have diversified their income stream so they can be able to sustain themselves over a period of time?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things that we talk about too, not just banks, but all organizations have their pillars, things that they're focused, their values, things that they say. So for us at WSFIS right now, one of them is workforce development, right? So a lot of the work that the gun violence preventions do so it's like learning how to talk the talk a little bit to say, okay, if I'm applying for a grant with this organization, I want to talk more about the workforce development kind of aspects of it. And it's, again, it's like then developing that familiarity and learning which companies give for what kind of, or the way I would like to flip it around is really starting with that community need picture to get people at a citywide level to say, here are priorities, private sector, we need 100 million for gun violence prevention work. We need 20 billion for home ownership, right? So this is what we want to fill. These are our priorities as a city, and let's sit around and talk about how we divvy up who's giving what.
I want you to touch a little bit again about this idea of a 10-year plan that's not dependent on who the mayor is. They can use private resources, can use public resources what does that 10-year plan look like in terms of the building of gun violence prevention hubs throughout the city?
A couple of things. One, the 10-year plan we talk about like a commission, so to speak.
Mhm.
So having these gun violence prevention organizations come together under the umbrella where there's some specific leadership.
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that there has to be a financial contribution from the city to make it sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
but also bringing in banks and philanthropy, that champion that we talked about. So that's the start. And we have to have an incremental, reachable outcomes per year
Mm-hmm.
so that we're not just walking blindly into it. Like, we have a plan. We got to have a plan. Every year we're going to do this thing. And not just gatherings and not just speeches or whatever, but something specific. There's an unreachable market out. I don't want to call them unreachable. There's an untapped market out there. The people who live under that,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
aren't being reached right now. There's no
Yes.
outreach to. So we can get the kids in the school. We can get the fringe guys. We get the people on probation and parole. We get the guys on the corner. But there's a whole group that's going under that radar that we have to be able to connect with in some way and make sure that we don't have another tragedy in this city. But the 10-year plan takes investment, it takes time, and it takes a strategy.
If building hubs, will hubs help do that?
Absolutely.
Where you, like Every Murder is Real has mainly dealing with trauma.
Right.
And you're dealing with mentorship, particularly with young men. Mothers in Charge dealing with mothers who are grieving. All coming under the same roof
Yes.
to use their various different skills and combine them where necessary.
Without losing their identity, right?
Mhm.
But also expanding on that to
Yes.
create, creating what's needed. So real quick, we did work with some kids at Vault, and they came up with the idea they want to create like a de-escalation room, like one of those sensory rooms that we can have like a little bit of reprieve if you're having one of those days and you're about to do something you're going to regret later, or you're arguing with a teacher, or whatever. So we got to give those kids a voice and a platform because they kind of know what they need. They just might not have the wherewithal to put it together. So having that free space that folks can really dictate the direction of their community, because if you're from North, you're probably not going to go to West Philly to that hub. You need one in each,
It's local.
every few blocks in that neighborhood.
We're down to the last 3 minutes, so I'm going to ask you to give kind of like your final remarks and kind of pull all this together for people as we're trying to understand this great dip in gun violence prevention, but also take advantage of how we can move forward over the next 10 years. Nicole, if you could start.
Yeah, I think just more so even than the 10-year plan, what I'm thinking about our listeners right now, and what can you do tomorrow? What can we do today? And I'd say, one, talk to your church, your whatever institutions, businesses you work with, your own personal self, and move your money to a local bank, local credit union, and talk to your banker about how are they investing in communities. Say, hey, are you investing in gun violence prevention groups? Know that they have obligations to do that and have that conversation. Hey, I want to bank with you. Tell me where you're investing our money. I think that's the biggest thing that folks can do right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we have to wait for government. We want to hold our government accountable. We want to hold elected officials accountable and demand what our needs are, but we also got to take action ourselves. We got to have skin in the game. You got to give up your time, your energy, some money, whatever you got to give, your intellect, your expertise, and join this fight. You got to get into the fight.
Absolutely. So I thank you both for being with us today, talking about gun violence, hopefully in a different way, that the audience understands it in a different way today. That really deep community investment is the key to public safety. No offense to the police, they do a wonderful job, but it is investing in our communities that make us safe. And you have seen the results over the last 4 years of deeper investment. If we do more, if we talk about 100 million or 200 million or 300 million directly to gun violence prevention organizations in the manner that's been talked about today, we can reduce this to double digits or even single digits, or dare I say, zero. Thank you so much for being with us today.